I truly cannot believe that the College Football Playoff Committee did what they did on Sunday afternoon. Cannot believe it. Never saw it coming. I did not think for 1 second that they had the stones to leave Florida State, undefeated Power 5 conference champion, out of the College Football Playoff. Didn't think they'd do it. Truthfully, I thought Texas was on the outside looking in because I didn't think there was a scenario where a one-loss SEC champion was not going to get into the College Football Playoff. When Alabama won that game, it was a slam dunk. Crimson Tide were in. No questions about it, in my mind. Not one iota of thought went into like, oh, I don't know, maybe they're not getting it. They were getting in. They were getting in the whole time. And I thought that the committee was going to have to explain away why the head-to-head matchup between Texas and Alabama didn't matter in the grand scheme of things because Florida State's undefeated Power 5 conference champion. Now, I'm fine with the decision that was made. Is Alabama a better team than Florida State? Yeah, they are. And that's really all that it comes down to it. And I know that stinks. I know that their argument could be made that devalues the regular season and that the games matter and that the losses have to matter, etc. When push comes to shove, is Alabama better than Florida State? Yes. Is Georgia better than Florida State? Yes. Is Ohio State better than Florida State? Yes. Is Oregon better than Florida State? You could make that argument. And this is something I tweeted before the playoff committee released their rankings, is that people operate under the idea that conference championships are created equally. They are not. Florida State is the champion of the ACC, the fifth best Power 5 conference in America in 2023. The fifth best conference champion finished fifth. And that's really all there is to it, regardless of whether they have a zero behind their name or not. And they should be commended. And I agree with this sentiment that in their non-conference schedule, they have a game against Florida. They have a game against LSU. They went out and scheduled a difficult opponent and got a nice win over LSU. If LSU was better this year, that win carries a lot more weight. Unfortunately for Florida State, they weren't. Unfortunately for Florida State, their best win is Alabama's third best win. When you're stacking that up, it matters, and it's unfortunate. Should a undefeated Power 5 conference champion have an opportunity to win the sports national championship? 100% absolutely unequivocally. But you cannot pretend as if the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, is not part of the reason why there is not a 12-team conference. There's not a 12-team playoff this year instead of a 4-team. The ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 stood in the way of Power 5 playoff expansion, so it happened next year instead of this year. You cannot pretend as if that is not the truth. So, while the ACC can be pissed off as all get out today, they can. They deserve to be angry. But karma is a bitch. And instead of your team being in the top 4, you're on the outside looking in because you vehemently argued against expansion for the playoff. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That happened. And to pretend as if it didn't is disingenuous. This happened. And while that is unfortunate, the quote-unquote historic alliance between the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC purposely stood in the way of college football playoff expansion. And now you only have yourselves to blame. Is it fair? No, not in the slightest. But anybody with half a brain has said for a long time the sport needs a playoff and a real, true playoff. And the old, rich white guys who operated, dominated, and had power over the sport said, no, I don't know if we'll be able to figure out how to do that. Geez, I'm criminy. Rhode Island High School's Athletic Association runs a football playoff. The fact that all these idiots that we let operate the sport for decades go, no, I don't know how we're going to do this. is ridiculous, and you only have yourselves to blame. Whether it's Florida State, whether it's Georgia, everybody bitched and moaned when somebody had the bright idea to say, you know, it would be a great way to decide who the best team is if we had each other play each other. And then everybody went, well, I don't know. I kind of like the system we got now. And it's stupid. And what is ironic as hell is if the old system that we used to declare a champion for 120 years of the sport, if it was still in place, you likely still get the same, like, you would get Michigan versus Washington in the Rose Bowl. It would be number 1 versus number 2, and the winner would be declared the national champion. And it's ridiculous and crazy to me to think that the way we did things forever would lead to a somewhat quasi-similar result to what you've got right now without a 14 playoff. But anybody with half a brain has told you for a long time, and people, there are people, especially college football media folks, who, since the 12-team playoff was even bandied about, have complained and said, oh, none of the college football playoff semifinals have been great so far. Why would you want to add more to them? And then you get a scenario where there are 5 Power 5 teams, and frankly, I hate to say this, and I've already said it. Conference championships are not equal. You can the second best team in the Pac-12, in my opinion, is better than the best team in the ACC. The second best team in the SEC is better than the best team from the ACC. The second best team in the Big Ten is better than the best team from the ACC. I would be hard-pressed to argue that Oklahoma, the second best team in the Big 12, is not better than the best team in the ACC. It's just a matter of fact, and that's okay. We don't have to operate as if each of these Power 5 conferences, each and every one of them are on a level playing field. They're all the same. Conference championship is conference championship. It's not. It's more difficult to win an SEC championship than it is the ACC championship. It's more difficult to win the Pac-12 this year than the ACC. It's more difficult to win the Big Ten than the ACC, and that's okay. But to pretend as if they are equal when they are not is a fool's errand. It's not true. It's not the case. That is not what is happening. Should 13-0 Florida State have the opportunity to win the national championship? Yes. And that's why the 14 playoff has always sucked. It has always been bad. It just got bailed out for 8 out of the 10 years it existed by Alabama, Clemson, LSU being above and beyond dominant compared to everybody else. That for a stretch of the 4-team playoff, it was abundantly clear who the top 2 teams in America were. And this year, in which what we should all want college football to be is super interesting, super exciting, high levels of parity at the top echelons of the sport. We should want that. It puts a wrench into the entire system, and the sport is going to be better for it. But I think the idea that Florida State got screwed today is misguided. They didn't. They weren't one of the best 4 teams in America, in my opinion, with Jordan Travis. You take that out of the equation, and you cannot justify putting them in. As harsh and unfair as that is to confront and deal with. And I feel for Jordan Travis because his tweet earlier, absolutely devastating to read. When your argument is, I wish the bottom part of my leg was pointing the wrong direction earlier in the season so you could see how good this team is without me, is heartbreaking to read. When your argument is, I wish I had broken my leg sooner so you could see that we are still a good team without me. And when you have to apologize to a fan base and a team because your injury kept your team from reaching the mountaintop, that sucks. I hate it. I feel terrible for the kid. But the college football playoff committee's job is to choose the 4 best teams in America. And putting Florida State 5 was a gift to begin with. Even having them in the conversation was hey, we are going to give you respect that you probably don't deserve. We're going to give your conference respect that probably doesn't deserve. And it boils down to like 2 questions. Do you think Florida State can win 2 games in the college football playoff and win the national championship? From what you saw last night against Louisville, do you believe Florida State was going to beat either Michigan and then Washington or Texas to win the national title? No. You don't. I think the biggest Seminole fan would tell you that they weren't going to beat both Michigan and then Washington or Texas. So, is it a participation trophy? Like, congratulations, you went 13-0. You have therefore earned a spot to get your clocks wiped by Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Or are we choosing the 4 best teams who are capable of winning the national championship? And I know that flies in the face of the college football rocks because the regular season matters and that losses need to matter, etc. But I've said before on this podcast, I think who you lost to doesn't matter nearly as much as who you beat. And who did Florida State beat that makes you go, oh, hell, we got to put them in? The answer is really nobody. They beat a Louisville team that was only as highly ranked as they were because they played in the ACC against a bad schedule. And the first time that they had to play somebody pretty difficult, and not even pretty difficult, Kentucky, they lost. And then they beat 9-3 LSU. And I'm sure when Florida State scheduled the game against LSU, they did not expect LSU to finish 9-3. But they thought this is going to be a really high-quality win if we can get it. And I'm somebody who sat here at the first episodes of this podcast to tell you I thought LSU was going to win the national championship and that Jaden Daniels was going to win the Heisman Trophy. I got 50% of that right. And I told you Florida State was going to beat LSU. But when you're marquee, like the fact that you lost to no one is not the argument that you think it is. Is the whole point of the sport to win? Yes. And I will die on the hill that trying to use somebody's victories against them is a losing proposition. If you're trying to say, well, Alabama only beat Auburn by 6, what was the point of the game? Was to win? Okay, well then. But not every game is created equal. Not every conference championship is created equal. And to pretend as if it is malarkey, poppycock, balderdash, bullcrap. It is not. It has never been and will never be. Florida State is a victim of a bad system that we all agreed to, knowing that eventually we'd get to a 12-team playoff or a 16-team playoff even. But leadership at Florida State, leadership in the Atlantic Coast Conference and the Big Ten and the Pac-12 argued against a system that would have benefited Florida State today. So I don't feel a ton of sympathy for the athletic director. I feel a ton of sympathy for Mike Norvell and for Jordan Travis and the Florida State players who went out and did everything that was asked of them. And sometimes doing everything that's asked of you, like playing in a game of football or a football season, sometimes doing everything that's asked of you is still not enough. And is that a shitty lesson to learn? Yes. Yes, it is. But the argument that the sport of college football has been wronged today, I cannot get on board with. I don't buy that. That's not true. The sport of college football was protected today because in a system where 3 games decide who wins the national championship, one of those games can't be a farce. You can't have 33% of your games be uninteresting, uncompetitive, illogical when everybody sitting at home knows this is not one of the four best teams. This is not one of the three best matchups to decide who wins the sports title. You cannot have it. And is that fun to argue? No. No, it's not. But it's the truth. The fact that Florida State was ranked number 5 to begin with was already a gift. Georgia is better than Florida State. I don't think anybody in the college football playoff committee room would argue otherwise. But you have to put them 5 because you have to say that an undefeated Power 5 conference champion is one of the 5 best teams in America. You have to. But we all know the truth. Believe me, I sat in this hotel room last night, and I was prepared to do a podcast today to say that the College Football Playoff Committee looked you dead in the eyes and lied to you to tell you that Florida State's one of the 4 best teams in America. That was the podcast I planned to record today because I told anybody that would listen, I don't believe they have the cojones to say, sorry, 13-0 wasn't good enough. I didn't think they'd do it. I thought we were going to have an all-time Texas meltdown because there was no way a 13-0 champ was getting left out, and there was no way a one-loss SEC champ was getting left out. Texas be damned. And then the argument ensued that Texas beat the tar out of Oklahoma State. Whoop-de-doo. They're 9-4. They got the tar beat out of them by South Alabama. But do I think Texas is one of the 4 best teams in the country? I do. Is Michigan, Washington? I do. So that's the way it shook out. I don't know if Alabama's one of the 4 best teams in the country, but I'll tell you that I left them for dead after they lost to Texas and after they struggled against South Florida. But do they deserve to be in the college football playoff? Yeah. Yeah, they do. And despite winning all of their games, does Florida State deserve to be one of the 4 best teams in damn near any other year? Yes. But are they better than Michigan? No. Are they better than Washington? No. Alabama? No. Texas? No. There you go. I think the reaction from Michigan tells you everything you need to know. If Florida State had popped up on the screen at number 4, Michigan probably cheers. When Alabama was ranked as the number 4 team, there was an audible groan from Michigan as they watched the selection show. And I don't think that should be like the deciding factor is, well, would Michigan rather play Florida State or Alabama? I don't think that should matter. But I think it tells you a lot that when you thought your opponent was going to be 13-0, Florida State, that you probably don't have to give a ton of respect to because they're playing without their starting quarterback, versus Alabama, who appears as hot as anybody in America. I think it's difficult to argue that they got it wrong. There's only slots for 4 teams in a Power 5 team system. Somebody's getting left out. And in this case, the conference champion of the 5th best conference sits at number 5, and I think that's as simple as it gets. Not all conference championships are created equally. And I think it's probably a good thing that we don't have to pretend as if they are any longer. Now, the long-term ramifications of this, I don't know that they're like Florida State's going to try to find a way to get out of the ACC. I think Clemson, North Carolina, probably Miami are going to try to join them as well. But essentially, the committee said today, we and especially this year, we don't necessarily respect the ACC all that much. And I don't think they're wrong for that. What in the ACC instills in you that, like, this is a major Power 5 conference where any of the top 3, 4, 5 teams in that conference can beat any of the top 3, 4, 5 teams from any other conference. They're not on equal footing right now with the Big Ten, with the SEC, hell, with the Big 12. They're not. So I don't know where they go from here. But Remember the first controversial playoff decision where the Big 12 got shut out because they didn't have a conference championship game, and then that led to a conference championship game, and then that led to more conference realignment and all that stuff. There's going to be some long-term consequence from the decision being made today, unintended or not. Something's going to come out of it, whether it's Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina's future in the ACC. But something's going to happen there, and we'll be able to look back at December 3rd, 2023 and go, remember when Florida State didn't get in and what had to happen for them to make sure that didn't happen going forward? Don't be surprised if we can come back and look at that day somewhere down the line and go, that was it. That was the turning point. But I think a 12-team playoff comes a year late when the ACC, Big Ten, and Pac-12 stood in the way to ensure that it didn't come earlier. And the ACC is now on the outside looking in, going, wait, this isn't fair. It's never been fair. It's never been a good system. It's just taking you getting burned by it for the first time to come to the same realization that the most casual fan went, wait a second, how do they just, like, college football has always had an illegitimate, for the most part, illegitimate championship structure. It doesn't make sense. It rewards brand recognition more than it rewards, do you play football good or not? And now we're moving away from that. The sport's better for it. But you're moving away too late. Florida State got burned, and they've only got themselves to blame. Well, there'll be plenty of fallout in reaction to this all throughout the week here on the Daily Huddle. The bowl game's going to be announced. We'll talk about that, the best, most intriguing matchups. Also, the Heisman Trophy is going to be awarded next Saturday, Army-Navy. It's still, despite Conference Championship Saturday being over and the selection committee making their decisions, there are still plenty of storylines to talk about this week on the Daily Huddle with Saturday Glory. That'll do it for today's episode. Back at it tomorrow. We'll see you then. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here at Saturday Glory. If you are listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. That goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll see you tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle, Saturday Glory.